What is going on, guys? This is LTX Nutcase bringing you the first installment of Weapons Wednesday, and within this series we are going to be taking a look at the weapons within Battlefield 2042, and within that we are going to be looking at the best setup for each. So starting with the attachments and then moving on to what gadgets and things like that I am going to pair it with in order to get the most from that gun. This episode we are looking at the SFAR, which in my opinion stands for Solid Fucking Assault Rifle. This thing is immense, okay? This thing is immense. It is by far my favourite AR, and I figured it is just the best weapon to kick this series off with. So bear with me and we will take a look at what makes this weapon so great and how to get the best from it. So the SFAR is by far the heaviest hitting assault rifle within Battlefield 2042 today. But what it makes up for in firepower, it loses on accuracy and handling. The recoil in this gun is immense. But if you stick with this loadout, I'll show you how to minimise that. But it is very difficult because it doesn't have an option for a grip. The trade-off for that though is you have a underbarrel grenade launcher attachment that provides far more utility than the underbarrel grenade launchers you get from the other rifles. So, pros and cons, and the SFAR definitely makes up for that shortfall because it just gives it so much more utility compared to the other ARs. Unless you want to take up 2 slots. But again, you only get 2 instead of 3 because you are going to want a grip to deal with the recoil. That does put a lot of pressure on the compensators, however, but with the right setup you can mitigate any issues very easily. So we're going to start going from the centre out and go attachment by attachment. We'll start with the barrel attachments for the SFAR because in my honest opinion these are the ones that make or break the gun. So we're going to start off by looking at the Warhawk compensator. This is by far the best barrel attachment I've found for the gun. Then there's the Champion muzzle brake, which has its uses in CQB, but because the recoil goes up mostly, you might as well just have the Warhawk compensator because it is far better for dealing with the barrel rise than the Champion. But in CQB, chances are you're going to be getting headshot from the barrel rise when your first shot lands centre of mass, but then from 100 metres out it becomes a pain in the backside. We also have the suppressor, and I've only got this on because it helps when you are approaching objectives to stay quiet, and particularly when you combine it with the Raven 4x scope, you can clear out the enemies and reduce the work you have to do. So we'll take a look at the scope later, but the barrel attachments are so important for the SFAR because you don't have the option to have an underbarrel grip, meaning that you have to rely on the compensators for all your recoil control, and it's hard to switch one out without completely changing how your gun reacts. So next we take a look at the scopes. Now I've touched across the Raven 4 times and it's not particularly the greatest scope, but it has its utility, so we're going to focus on the other 2 that I have on first. So the UH 1.5 is just a drastically good scope. You don't lose any of your peripheral vision, making it such a beautiful scope to be running in CQB. Now if you don't understand what I mean for the peripheral vision, you will see it in the video. Just watch what happens when I aim down sight with the different scopes. Because it's such a clear sight, it makes it so good at picking off targets up close. I also have the TV 2x scope, which blurs a little on the peripheral vision, but you can still make out most targets and gives you such a clear sight picture and helps you with targets at that longer range. It's by far becoming my favourite setup because the UH is my comfort scope. It's the one I use for my AK, which was my most used gun. So the 2x scope just gives you that advantage in most arenas of combat, but when you're up close and personal you're going to want the 1.5 times. The Raven 4 times I have on there for dealing with targets a little further, and it definitely makes the gun a sniper buster. You could quite comfortably set it up with the 6 times scope, but in my opinion the cons outweigh the pros there because you start to get scope glint. So all it takes is one shot from a sniper to end you. You don't want to give them any extra heads up. So all ranges are really covered by this gun. It's one of the only guns I've been comfortable going up against snipers without full blown assault in them, and it's the scopes that really help with that. So let's take a look at the ammo types and magazines available for this gun. You have standard issue rounds, which were my personal favourite up until I unlocked the drum magazine. The reason for that is the recoil is very manageable, so it's still my ammo of choice for CQB engagements, and compared to the high power rounds that you get as the standard for this gun, there's a higher capacity. I really like the fact that you get 30+1 instead of just 20+1, which is the standard for the SFAR. But obviously there's a damage trade-off there. However, because you're more likely to land your shots, and frankly the extra in the magazine, it's a no-brainer. Up until you unlock our next attachment, which is the high power drum magazine. The high power drum magazine is immense. You have a 40+1 ammo capacity, and whilst you get more recoil than the standard issues, it definitely pays off as long as you're not having to fire that many rounds. If you're dig in and you're able to, you know, trade shot for shot with your enemy, it's going to stand you in good stead. I also have the armor piercing rounds. These are useful for getting those last few shots on a tank if you run out of explosives to deal with them, or even for dealing with squads that are backed up by a angel, just because it can decrease that time to kill. But frankly, they are very underutilized. The trade-off for damage, I rarely run them because once you've got through that body armor, you may as well just have got the extra damage from the high power. We'll also take a look at why I'm swapping around the ammo quite a bit. It's just circumstantial. Sometimes you're going to want that lower recoil to deal with your up close enemies. Sometimes you just want that extra stopping power. So yeah, take it with a grain of salt. At the end of the day, this is going to be what works for you, but those would be my picks for the magazines. So the final lot of attachments we're going to look at are the underbarrels that you want. Now this is what makes this gun so unique. No other gun in the game has a integral grenade launcher, and it gives you far more utility for the gun. So we have an incendiary, an armor piercing, and a smoke grenade, and when you're using that on battlefield, it just means you can fill pretty much any role. The incendiary round gives you a really good ability to provide area denial. It's really good for stopping people chasing your team from moving down certain pathways and things like that. So the utility, if you're using the gun properly, is immense, and what they lack in sheer damage they make up for in the strategies you can implement. We also have the armor piercing rocket, grenade, which isn't particularly useful, but in a pinch it could make the difference between destroying a tank and not. And my personal favourite is the smoke grenade. Definitely if you're running a medic, the SFAR should be your weapon of choice, because it gives you the ability to throw your grenades further and revive your teammates relatively safely. They're also useful for evading sniper fire and to build a wall of smoke between you and the enemy without necessarily having to compromise your visual on teammates, on tanks and things like that. So it's definitely the underbarrel attachment that makes the gun what it is, gives it that unique character. It's also the reason that you are, as of this moment in time, struggling with the ADS glitch, because it's the underbarrel attachments on leaving a vehicle or a drone that causes the ADS function to stop working, but I'm hoping that'll be patched in time. But yeah, all in all, it's a really solid gun, and these are the attachments that I'm going to run for the gun, and I hope you guys do too. So the last part we're going to take a look at is the class that I put this gun into, and how you're going to use the gadget, the throwable and the secondary weapons to get the absolute most you can get from this absolutely banging gun. So the secondary weapon is the M44. Definitely not the best pistol in the game. I mean, it's capable of one-shot kill headshots, so if you want to be very flash you can get a few kills pretty easily, but it's lacking. But its sheer damage definitely makes it good at disabling enemy equipment, so it earns a place on this heavy hitting class. Now I've got the C5 explosive for the simple reason that you can level tanks so easily, so definitely bear that in mind. You could easily swap it out for armor plates or anything, because survivability matters. So Flam, if you're working with someone, you're flexible, this is your class, I'm not telling you how to play the game, but you know, for a class that I have named Demo, C5 explosive definitely earns a place. It's my favourite attachment because everything that's anti-tank in my opinion is rather lacking, so you know. And the reason that I prefer this to others is because you can use smoke grenades. If you use your smoke grenade from the SFAR, run up, place 3 of these on the side of even the toughest tank, you are making some kid cry. So bear that in mind and blow up some kids. Speaking of blow up some kids, we have the frag grenade. Whilst frag grenades aren't that punishing, although in the latest update they have increased the damage, it's definitely useful for covering your approach to somewhere because no one wants to take damage and potentially die one bullet sooner, so people are going to be wary when they get that heads up. And frankly, I don't have anything other than the C5 explosive that explodes other than that, since I'm running incendiary smoke and armor piercing, so for area of effect attacks it definitely helps. With this class, it's not the most aggressive class. It's best used as a mid-range bruiser that can be used in close range quarters. So yeah, just find how this setup works for you. Don't be afraid to swap the weapons on the fly, and frankly, you're just going to be the anchor for your team. You know, dig in tight, clear anything that moves, deal with any equipment you come across. Play tactical. The demolition class is definitely there to give you the tactical edge, and in my opinion that tactical play is the thing that makes the SFAR so solid. If you're playing it right, you are going to be the best supportive member of your team, because if you're not having to worry about ranges, you're not having to worry about sentry guns, and you've got someone embedded making the enemy too scared to move, you are going to be worshipped. So yeah, guys, thanks for watching this video. Please feel free to drop a like, feel free to subscribe, and I will see you next Wednesday for Weapon Wednesday. Thanks guys.